So now some play. We're going to compare some designs. So first one, this is a CEPI's plant. This is designed by the Pan American Health Organization. This is water from multiple sources coming into a plant. And right along here somewhere, they're going to be adding coagulant. There's a little hydraulic jump or a little waterfall. And then right there, they're adding the coagulant. The water continues on and goes into the plant. And there's my Cornell students hanging out. And on the right are flocculators. So these are flocculators that the water goes back and forth around these wooden baffles. And on the other side are sedimentation tanks. So you can see the effluent manifolds and you can see plate settlers down in there and you can see some students, and that was the end of that. So what I'd like you to do is stare at this design. So this is, I'm sorry, the image is as good as I was able to get. This is an image of what's happening inside their version of a sedimentation tank. And I want you to take what you've learned so far and think about what might go wrong. And if you can read Spanish, all the better, right? Because this is all put together in Spanish because it's out of a manual produced in Peru. I want to show you how a water particle goes through. I can kind of do this animation. So it begins in this canal distribuidor de agua floculada. So this flocculated water channel that's right in the middle of the page where my blue dot is. And that blue dot is going to go down through an orifice and into the bottom of the sedimentation tank, find its way over, flow up in between the plate settlers, and then into this outlet channel, and it's gone. Okay, so that's roughly the path of water. Sorry, you can't follow that because you can't see when it's behind things and when it's going, between plates. But that's the path. Now, critique the design. What do you think might not work well in this design? Or if you were a plant operator and had to do some maintenance on this plant, what would you find awkward? Oh, there's a great question. Are those plate settlers made of asbestos cement? And that is exactly what they say. They are made of asbestos cement. And I'm betting you're thinking that's not a good idea. And you are right. It's not a good idea. I think this design was made before, I was looking at their manual this morning, and they have a picture of plastic plate settlers that failed because they got brittle, which goes to another insight that Agua Clara has had, and that is that all water treatment plants should be under roof to protect the system from sunshine. This is a revolutionary idea in the world of water treatment, that you should have a roof over a water treatment plant. And that actually makes it so that plastic plate settlers work and are a solid option. One of the ways to think about critiquing is, if something went wrong, and you can think about all the possible things that might go wrong, how would you fix it? So there's a flat bottom to the tank. So what do you think? What's the issue with the flat bottom? So there would be sludge accumulating on that flat bottom. You now know that if there's a flat surface, sludge is going to accumulate on it. Okay, so how does the sludge get out of the bottom? Do you see that? I didn't detail that, but there's these little holes. Like here's a little hole. And that little hole is connected to this drain channel. So there's a valve at the end of that drain channel. Presumably they open up that valve and it starts sucking out of those ports. What do you think about the ability of those ports to empty the sludge that's sitting on the bottom of the sed tank? So one possibility is that hole could clog up pretty fast. Yeah, and they're elevated off the bottom, so they wouldn't even get all the sludge. And I have to I have to explain another thing about fluids. Have you all used a vacuum cleaner that has the option for connecting the hose to the blower end so that it's discharging a jet of air? And have you like noticed that you can use that and you can blow dirt away from a pretty long distance? Now, connect it the way it's supposed to be with the vacuum cleaner sucking through that tube. And arguably, it's the same velocity of water going through the tube in both cases because mass is conserved, right? What's going into the vacuum cleaner has to come out. But how far away can you suck into a vacuum hose? Like it's I don't know, something like, is it something like maybe 10 centimeters? Whereas you could probably blow it away, maybe even more than a meter. Depends on how strong your vacuum was, right? I'm not making this up, this is real. And it's the same velocity. So what's the difference? This is like, there's some good pondering happening. What is the difference? Okay, so when the discharge is coming out of the vacuum hose, that's got momentum. It's a jet, and it just keeps on going kind of in a straight line, and it slowly entrains fluid from around it because it's turbulent and that jet slowly expands, but it travels forward really far as it's slowly dissipating into the environment. The reverse, when you have a vacuum sucking, now the fluid that's entering that hole comes from everywhere. It sees this as a sink, and it comes from all around the vacuum, even from back behind the vacuum. It comes around and it goes into that hole from everywhere. So it's pulling air in from like a sphere. Air is flowing in spherically, like, I'm not using the right words, but it's all coming in like a sphere towards that center point. And that means that the velocity, as soon as you get just the tiniest distance away from the vacuum hose port, the velocity has dropped off tremendously. And here's the fun part. Humans, we breathe through our noses. When we exhale as a jet, and it travels a nice long distance. When we inhale, we bring air in from close to us. If that weren't the case, if it were the same in both directions, we would just be exhaling air and breathing the same air back in again. But when we exhale, it's a jet. When we bring it in like a sphere coming in. So anyway, to this point, now you know that those drain holes for the sludge are not going to be sucking sludge in from across the bottom. So it will not clean. I'm going to go back to looking at your comments. So the question about the launders, it seems like the launders are spaced, the launders or the effluent manifolds, you can see two of them there. I'm not sure if this drawing is completely correct according to their design, although it might be. We can look at a picture in a second. And yes, you do need to keep the distance between those effluent manifolds not too far apart. Otherwise, you won't be using all of your plate settlers well. The left side is open because we are doing like a cut. We did a section cut for this drawing. It's not actually open. So that was great. Here's another thing that I think would be a problem, and that is, how do you get underneath these plate settlers to clean out the sludge that we now know is going to accumulate there? Because you're not going to be lifting out all those asbestos plates. By the way, asbestos plates are a bad idea. They aren't as bad as you might first think, because drinking a little bit of asbestos is not actually that hazardous. it's inhaling it that's the problem. However, when you're taking your shower, you're inhaling air that is very moist from the water, and so that's where the asbestos connection would be. Don't worry, we're not using asbestos plate settlers in our designs, and I'm sure they're not either. This is an old design because they were very active decades ago and are no longer so active. Okay, so that was great. Critique the design. You got that one. And I would also say that there's a fair risk that sludge would accumulate inside that channel. I'll show you more about that in a second. And I'm curious how they're suspending their plate settlers. And I'm also curious, like, how do you assemble this channel system where there's the collection channel on top of the inlet channel, and that looks like a rectangular box. It's too small for a person to get in there. So it's not clear to me how you actually fabricate that. So here's a view of that same design, but now from a nice photo. And you're seeing the spaced out launders or effluent manifolds. They're not very far apart. So they seem like they're closer in this actual photo than what they were in the drawing. This concrete slab that we see on the left of the photo is where those channels are buried. So the inlet and outlet channels are buried underneath there. And there's a cover that would allow you to see, I guess, the effluent or exit water. There's a subtle thing here. See where the water level is relative to the orifices on these pipes? The water level is right at the orifices, which means that the level of the orifice is actually determining the level of the water in the tank. And that means that if those those effluent manifolds are not perfectly level, if they're sloped a little bit, then the orifices are sloped, and then it will preferentially pick up water from the lower orifices. You see that? If the orifices are sloped, if that pipe isn't level but it's sloped, then the orifices that are down further will be the ones that will get all the water. Right, there's holes all along here. The lower level orifices will have a higher head pushing water in, so they'll get all the water, and you won't get uniform flow. So we get around that problem of having to have precisely installed manifolds by having the entire manifold submerged, and then the pipe is full of water. Our manifold or our launder is actually full of water as well, and so it doesn't matter if it's sloped or not. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the Agua Clara evolution, and we'll at least start on this. So I wanted to be clear that we also made some very bad designs. And I would argue that we continue to make mistakes, and we continue to learn from those mistakes. So here's our very first plant, Ohohona, and it's basically a rectangular box. We designed the simplest thing possible. It's a rectangular box, and now you know there's going to be sludge accumulating in the bottom, and it's going to be a pain. Then we went to another design, and I realized the image is not great, but we now have a sloped bottom, and we have, in this case, there are 4 pipes that are bringing water in. So each pipe goes in and then ducts down and is blowing water towards the bottom of the tank. And there's 4 of them coming in at different places. That was at least a slightly improved design. So there you can see more clearly 3 inlets dumping water into the bottom of the tank. And then I'll show this one. So this was our next improvement after those previous ones. And we're in this search of, we're trying to get a flock filter in the bottom of our tank. And so we have this idea that we're going to have water that at the end of this photo, at the top is the inlet channel, just on the other side of that concrete wall. And so our water particle is in that inlet channel, and it's going to drop straight down from that channel through what's like a vertical chimney. It's a rectangular opening that the water can flow down through, and then it will pop out underneath this sloped bottom. So this is where the water travels. It goes down, and then it goes down the chimney, then it pops out of a hole underneath those slope pieces. It comes up through the port that was at the very bottom of the sedimentation tank that these slope pieces create. And it looked just like, this is a wonderful design. But maybe you're already thinking you see some problems with this based on what we've been learning. So let's look at what actually happened. So now I'm showing you the good and the bad. On the left is what it looked like when we made it, and on the right was a few months later. And you can see there's a worker in there with his boot. I'm showing half the image. And look, we had envisioned our flocks flowing into the middle of this sedimentation tank and settling out there. But the flocks didn't get the message. And so they thought, well, why not hang out in this triangular region back here? And they settled out there instead. And they thought that was perfectly fine. But look at this. I don't know if you can tell, like here, there's this nice brown dirt, but look here. Do you see that there's some other color showing up here? It actually is black. And it's because it's anaerobic. And the workers said it really stank when they cleaned this out. And it was a pain to clean out. So I hope that you are now being indoctrinated in this idea that sedimentation tanks need to be cleaned, need to have a design that keeps them clean all of the time. And for Agua Clara, where we're not using scrapers to clean them, it means thou shalt have no flat surfaces. Because everywhere where